Yes, so my name, as you kindly introduced, my name is Sena Gbedemah. I'm a managing director at Secretariat International. Secretariat International is a company in basically a company or a firm, like a partnership. We're in the forensic and dispute space. Got about over 20 offices worldwide. And we practice in four main areas, well, yeah, four main areas: forensic and expert witness, construction experts. We got forensic accountants. We do cybersecurity and data analytics. Data analytics normally to support investigations um, and disputes and major international disputes. But where did I start? So my education really started actually what you don't see on the slide. I'll start from the beginning. Is that my education started in uh, in a place called Mushi in Nigeria. In Mushi, Lagos. That's where I started private primary school. And when I was 8, I moved to the homeland, Ghana, and there I went to Northridge Lyceum in Northridge, and from there I went to did my common entrance and went to Achimota School, and I was at Achimota School for 5 years. I finished from five, and then went on to do my sixth form in the UK. After sixth form there, I did a Bachelor of Engineering in Civil Engineering at University of Manchester. Moved on to do an MSc in construction. It was actually called Management in Construction with law at Kingston University. Uh, the reason why did I do that? I actually did it directly after my bachelor's, and the reason I did it is I think I had done something like over 100 job applications and just couldn't get a job. So I decided to go and improve my chances by getting a further qualification, related qualification. There's always got to be, I believe there's always got to be a plan and not just to collect degrees or whatever. And then after my management and construction, I moved on to actually work. I worked as a site engineer for a company called BAM Nuttall. At the time, they were called Edmund Nuttall, and they were one of the maybe top five heavy civils, you know, contractor in the UK, and at the time in Netherlands. Now they're worldwide. There, I did roads, I did bridges, I did precast bridges. I did some sea defenses, also some remediation sites. Basically, did heavy civils. I actually worked on the UK's first post-tensioned suspension bridge as the site engineer, setting out the details for the men there. So, unfortunately, or fortunately for me, at that time, BAM did not give me a training scheme. To become chartered, you need to have a period of construction or on-site experience, and you also need consulting or design experience. So because they didn't give me a training scheme, and or I ticked all my construction site boxes, and I needed to get chartered, I joined a company called Atkins. They're now called Atkins or Atkins Global as a design engineer, but at the time they were called WS Atkins. There I did my design experience on airports, mainly airports and airfields, some foundation works, And I spent, I think, just around 5 years as a design manager, a design engineer, and a design manager. Then I moved on because I was really more focused on wanting to be a project manager. I moved on to EC Harris, who are now, uh, that name is no more. They got acquired by a company called Arcadis. So it's now Arcadis, EC Harris is now Arcadis in the UK. There I was seconded to London Underground, and I was fortunate enough to have been a project manager in London Underground when they went through the UK's first PPP, um, private, public private funding arrangement for London Underground. It got split into four different parts, one holding part to manage the men and the trains and the timetables, and three infrastructure companies. And I was working for one of them. I spent quite a few years there. Then at that point, I also got EC Harris. They were offering to, you know, if you wanted to take further education, uh, you could apply, and I did, and I was lucky enough to get that, and I went on to do my postgraduate diploma in law, and then that was 2 year course. Uh, it's like the MSc level there, and then a legal practice course. So that's a brief look at my experience. After that, I joined PwC. I was at PwC for 7 years. Navigant, I was actually at Navigant for 10 years. I would say Navigant Ankara because Ankara acquired Navigant. So I was a Navigant employee for 4 years, but through the acquisition, I stayed a further 6 years with Ankara. And I recently joined a company called Secretariat International. And Secretariat International, PwC, Navigate, and Ankara doing effectively the same thing, which is being a forensic investigator and an expert witness. You've got a list of my publications there, so I'm not going to go too much into that at the moment. Now, this talk, I've really it's so broad that the best way to there's no way it can be covered in the short time that we have here. You're literally talking about my life's experience. So I've split it into two parts. The first part we'll be talking about is the causes of dispute, just to run through a few disputes and talk about what I've seen in my experience so far. And then the second part, which is talking about proactive risk management and contract management approaches, basically part of project governance. So, without further ado, moving into typical causes of delay in construction projects. Now, there are various publications that you can Google out there that if from companies like Secretariat, like Navigant, like Ankara, where you can look at the typical causes of delay on construction projects. And by construction projects, we mean uh, literally infrastructure, buildings, uh, you name it, anything that you have to construct, process plants, power plants, airports, um, high-rise buildings, uh, sometimes even shipbuilding. I've been involved in FPSOs, for instance, in Tema and Takoradi, as well as further afield in Saudi Arabia. Um, so you name it, different types of projects, they have essentially the same feature. A, they're unique. They're unique in the sense that they have not, um, they probably, the same project has not been done somewhere before. So it's unique. There might be a similar project, there might be repeated designs, but the location might not be the same, or there'll be something else that will mark it out as being unique. So the project's unique, it's got a start and a finish. And because it's unique, there is no prototype. So the actual project is the prototype, if you like. Yeah. So, and because of that, it presents different types of risks, and different types of challenges. So how does that manifest? Well, firstly, because it's unique, you have to plan the project. You have to size up the project. And by planning the project and sizing up the project, by sizing up, I mean actually the physical size, the requirements of the project, the maybe the economic requirements from the government, or the performance requirements from the client, if it's a private client, if it's a multinational company. So you'd have to basically work out the scope. In working out the scope of the project, you then would estimate how much time that scope would take you to build, and there are various ways you can do that. I was a project manager, as I said, at London Underground. London Underground being a client organization, client or employer, if you like, organization, where they have a portfolio of projects, and they have various project managers, as opposed to another type of client that might just be perhaps a bank that wants a headquarters. A bank would typically not have a project portfolio because they're not in the process of continually to build headquarters. They'll build maybe one headquarters in one country or one city, and not keep on repeating it. They're in the business of banking. So they would be an inexperienced client, whereas a client like London Underground, or uh, the Ghana National Petroleum Company, for instance, would be more of what we call an intelligent client, because they know about projects. They're in the process of delivering projects as a client organization. So if you're in the client organization and you want to estimate the time and the cost of your project, um, a project manager like me would estimate it, would have various people. Like, for instance, I had designers, I had lawyers, I had lawyers in terms of land acquisition, uh, getting contracts and things like that. But you'd have, when I was in London Underground, I had track engineers, signal engineers, contract specialists working for me, working for the projects in that organization. But also, yeah, I would go to market and get a logistics expert, if you like, a contractor who is experienced at building. At the time, the project I was looking at London Underground was bridge replacements. So it was replacing London Underground's cast iron bridges. They were old, and cast iron, the civil engineers amongst you would know cast iron fails catastrophically, uh, as opposed to steel that doesn't. And so they were replacing all these old cast iron bridges with steel bridges. And because it's a ongoing service, you would have to um, plan the replacement, book. It's an 18-month an 18-month endeavor where you would book various, like book your possession on the track, book your safety people, engage your contractor, and plan everything to happen over a weekend. So you plan for 18 months and you do everything in 56 hours in order to keep the service going. Of course, that has lots of risks. And the reason why I went on to this ex particular example was I was trying to tell you about how you would estimate it, and the way you'd estimate it would be various people would give you their view of how long their piece would take, whether it was a track design engineer or a construction logistics expert down the line. They would give you their view of how long that would take. You'd put it all together. You'd have a planner, a construction Primavera or Microsoft project operator working with you who would put it into a plan, and in so doing you would have a drawn up plan of the whole project, the first view of the whole project, and then you then go through a series of value engineering where you look at specific areas, you look at various risks, and you'd refine the timeline, refine the estimate, refine the costs. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, but there are still risks and there are still delays, as we know, and construction projects get delayed all the time. Now, the top 10 causation factors, from my experience, and uh, you see on the slide there, I've said MENA, that's Middle East and North Africa, but that's because this table was actually prepared for a client in the Middle East. But the same things apply. So what I've done here is try to do a frequency score of how often those things turn up. But if you read down the page, you see there's a change in scope. The contract requirements might be poorly defined. Um, the contract might be operated badly. Design information, design is always a one that comes up time and again. Maybe the information was issued late. That's a typical one. Or sometimes it's incomplete. That can be typical, especially um, in in emerging markets like the Middle East and Africa. Um, the skill experience that tends to be not so high in terms of a cause of delay. Access is always comes up. So literally, I've tried the ones in red are the ones that I've given a score of 10. They come up all the time. Obviously, there will be ones that you can see, and you can identify weather conditions might be quite bad. I mean, most contracts provide for adverse weather conditions, but when they're exceptionally adverse, that can be an issue. There might be poor interface with a third party. Maybe the client has another contractor. The client or employer has another contractor delivering projects or delivering a part of the project. That might also be an issue. Or you might have, I mean, some of these are low, like bias or failure to cooperate. That's quite low. Um, but yeah, you've got a whole list of causes, and it would be interesting if you could indicate later on, or let me know which ones you particularly see in your jurisdiction. So these causes are just factors that arise in disputes. And you go remember that, construction projects, they're unique, they're risky, These things occur all the time, but what the things that make them turn into disputes tend to be, unfortunately, or as you would expect, um, is basically systems and people. So maybe there's a bad system, there's a maybe undeveloped system in the company, like a project governance system, which I'll come on to in a minute, or um, or you may lack experienced people, uh, or you could have different attitudes from people. So people really impact the way risk is, the way whether a project turns into a dispute it really depends on the people. So there are common factors. If you have a systemic approach and you have good people, then you can be ready for these common factors and not fall into dispute. And by having this systemic approach is what we call project governance. And so effectively, my job is twofold. I either look at disputes where there's been, delays, um, which is at the end of a project, or I may get asked to help advice on how to avoid disputes. And a typical way that I do that, or we do that as a firm, um, is to uh, put in or set in place a systemic approach to governance. So, how do we do that? This is a model I developed when I was advising a particular client, but it's not unique to me. I mean, this is a common model all over the world. If you ignore the boxes on the right for the minute and let me describe the structure. So you have a development company, and I was talking to you. I was saying about a an intelligent client. So typically, it will be a development company like an intelligent client like GMPC or some maybe Ghana Railways or some organization that has a portfolio of projects. So these are the portfolios, right? And then you might have programs and you might have project one, two, three. So a program would be a capital program, CapEx, and then you have operations. So um, in a railway or an airport or a power station, you have your normal operations, um, and you have your projects. So you have your OPEX, your operational spend, and you have your capital spend. And so I'm talking about the capital spend because that's where the projects are generated, and that's where typically I focus. And you have a number of projects. And basically, what this development company or client organization needs to do, it will have various departments which are not shown on here. It will have an HR department, a finance department, maybe a legal department, and various other departments, IT, whatever. But it will also have like a project. There might be a project director and a projects office or whatever, and that department will be responsible for managing the projects and reporting to the other departments or interacting with the other departments. Like, for instance, um, the finance department, it would need to the costs, the way the projects are managed can affect the finances of the company. So there would be a lot of interaction there. Equally, there might be HR people, there might be people, employees working on those projects. So there might be interaction with HR, maybe as to the training, um, skills development, and just general and other things to do with employment of the people on that project. So we're focused on the project directorate. And in the project directorate, what this is the part of the governance of the organization that is um, linked with corporate governance. So the corporate governance is some of the things I just talked about, the finance, the HR. They'll be governed under the corporate governance umbrella, but within that, there will be project governance. And project governance is focused on portfolio direction, project sponsorship, project management and effectiveness, and disclosure and reporting, right? So this is really governance. So they're really trying to control the project. So this is what these smaller arrows are about. So there's information going down, instructions, regulations, protocols as to how we do things, going down the page, and a lot of these you recognize. And then going up the page, information. This is information, monthly reporting, progress reports, board reports, reporting finances, reporting slip timelines and programs. These all go up the page into the board so they can report to the wider corporate. Now, so project governance is really focused on all of that, and this, if you look at this project management effectiveness and efficiency, that's really key for all of these projects. And project management effectiveness. Now, this is unique to my company. It's in terms of how I've demarcated the various bits. So I call these the 12 pillars of project management and effectiveness. But I mean, they will happen in every company in different ways, but you'd recognize them. So you'd have there's governance and decision making, a scope and benefits definition, which we talked about quite a bit. There's program and schedule control. Again, we talked about costs and resources. We talked about risk and opportunities, stakeholder engagement. Of course, the stakeholder is in here, but there may be external stakeholders as well. Change control, very important, very, very important. Contract and supply chain management, also important. And of course, team performance, stage gate reviews, that's for really reporting up the line. Record keeping, document and management, I mean, is that's a sacred ground, record keeping in my business, in delay analysis. What we do, or forensic investigations, what we do is go to the records, and typically disputes tend to happen where there's bad record keeping. So I cannot stress records, records, records. There's quality assurance and recovery, and of course, lessons learned so you can repeat it and do it again in a better way. So this is really the framework. I mean, this on a page shows there's a body of knowledge and and several documents and processes, and it's summarizing quite a lot. It's going to be impossible to go through all of this in any detail. Perhaps consumer, we might have to make a couple more presentations if the demand's there. But what I've tried to do is briefly look at these four and also look at change, control, and risk, I think, on the following slides, but we'll see when I turn to them. So, portfolio direction. So, portfolio direction, and apologies for the lack of images on these slides, but uh, to be improved. So project portfolio direction is really aligning the organization's objectives. So the organization will have certain profits it wants to make. It may want a certain type of reputation or sustainability or service. So that's what portfolio direction is about. It's aligning the project to suit the goal of the company. Project sponsorship, that's linking. So we've all heard of project sponsor, but typically project sponsorship is about linking the corporate with the project. The senior executive body, i.e. board, of the organization and management of the project. It's basically communication. That's the link. And those are the arrows that I showed you on the previous slide. Project management effectiveness, I went into the 12 pillars. It's all about the project team and making the project team really effective, whether it's training, whether it's managing risk properly, whether it's giving them the tools or giving them the system or giving them the training. All of that, it contributes to the competence of the organization to deliver the project of objectives. And as I said, I was going to look at risk quickly and change, I think. And of course, there's disclosure and there's a disclosure and reporting component. If and I said this before about records, it's all about records up and an instruction down into the project. Where this is weak, this can also lead to issues in terms of project control, um, maybe even things like contingency management, where you might find that there are project managers who agreeing increased costs without alerting the board, say. And so they're committing the company without alerting the board, and that can also lead to problems down the line. So um, really important disclosure and reporting. So as I said before, just breaking into just a tiny foray into project management effectiveness. Um, so that's this. I've repeated this slide intentionally just to say we're looking at some of these here, which are, um, I guess, the correct numbering procedure would have been because they're all part of three above. All of these should have been A, B, C down. So it'd be 3A, 3B, 3C. Now, and again, I've kept it quite high level. Um, Risk and opportunities management. So you identify the risk. When you I described how you gather all the different project participants, like the track engineer, systems engineer, maybe signaling engineer in the case of railways, or boiler engineer in the case of power stations. You might gather their views on scope and time. And what you would do then is identify the risks that can cause delay or increase costs. And you would mitigate those risks through value engineering. Some of them you can mitigate out. You can do it through design, but there will be some risks that will remain. And these are what we call residual risks. And these residual risks, you might say, well, we might solve them by, um, allowing a contingency. You will allow a contingency, or you might even allow time. You might even say, well, if this risk happens, then we need 2 more weeks to do to 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 do it. And you put that time contingency into the program. The the contingency pot, effectively you've got your estimate and then you've got your list, your risks that you think are maybe the 10 or so, your top 10 risks, and you put values next to them. You go to your board and you apply for your estimate of the project plus your contingency pot. In some organizations, they will hold the contingency pot away from the project manager, but it is his contingency pot that he just has to, tick a box and draw down if the risk happens. In other organizations, they give the contingency pot to the project manager to be able to manage it on his own, but he's obviously got to account for it in his disclosure and reporting. Um, and uh, and then there might be some residual risks that you can't manage within the client organization. And those risks you would typically allocate to other people who can manage them better. And those people might be a contractor or some sort of specialist. Maybe it's commissioning a power plant, um, in Takoradi, maybe Abuadzi or something, power plant. And there you would put it into your contract and you would allocate monies in the contract for the contractor saying, look, this is your risk, you manage it. Or typically it wouldn't be called a risk, it would say, um, we want our power plant to deliver so many megawatts um, on an increasing scale for the next 12 years. And he has to go and design uh, or source the design of the power plant and run and operate the power plant to deliver that. So that's another way of pushing that risk down to him because you as the organization don't want to hold that risk. Um, and uh, uh, Typically I put down the gates process there. So typically it's prudent as a project manager to have um, gates in. Typically you have an organization that will have, where I was working, there were six gates, right? There was a gate when you were starting, and obviously there was a gate when you finish, and there was typically a gate before you go out to market to engage an external company. And those gates will have specific things that they check to make sure that um, everything is the way it should be before you proceed past the gate. If anyone wants to know more about Gates process, then by all means, drop me a line afterwards. Now, I'll put change control there because it's so important. So change control is all about managing and it's about managing change within that client organization and within the supply chain if you've engaged a supply chain. I've already talked about the Gates process, organization through the Gates process and contingency management that helps with the change control. In the supply chain, obviously, you would have a contract, whether it's a FIDIC or NEC 4 or 3, or in the UK, we use the Joint Contracts Tribunal contracts for buildings. And if it's a civil engineering one, we use the Institution of Civil Engineers. But sometimes particular sectors have their own contracts, like rail in the UK is typically NEC, or internationally, most international ones in the Middle East, for instance, are FIDIC. And typically the process and power plants I've been involved in Ghana tend to be FIDIC or a variant of FIDIC as well. But all of these contracts, what they're doing is effectively managing risk. And one of the ways they manage risk is by having a change a, a change mechanism where you can increase the scope by a variation and if that variation needs more time, then you got an extension of time mechanism as well to that goes with the change mechanism. So that's how all these contracts typically work there. And they all have their own ways and their own problems, might I add, at doing that. one of the key things about construction projects that to avoid delay is to agree change quickly. So um, you typically the projects that I've seen that have big delays is where the change mechanism has broken down, where people don't agree change quickly, um, and maybe they're quite particular about certain bits, or they get into a to and fro about quantifying the change or agreeing an extension of time, and you have them piling up. And when they pile up, it's a big number, and no one in the project has authority to agree the big number, and it results in a dispute. And some of these disputes can be, uh, they can run into um, hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. I'm currently three disputes that I'm currently in or involved in. One's a major international airport in Europe that's been going for a number of years. In the courts, there's the there's another one that's a tunnel in a war-torn territory where the contractor had to basically leave. It was a force major event. Contractor had to leave, left all his equipment, left the tunnels half built, the stations half built, which obviously he wants his equipment back. Tunnel boring machines are very expensive. And there's a dispute with the National Rail Authority in that jurisdiction. Um, Another one that I'm involved in is a train manufacturing project and that's not construction project, it's a manufacturing project. So it's building trains. Uh, there are 80 trains. Um, but what's typical I mean, you can see that it's a diverse range, but what's typical is not agreeing change very quickly. So that would be my final message to you. I see that we're we've got 10 minutes left, so I would like to leave that open to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Sena, for that enlightening and practical presentation. So at this moment, I would open the floor to our audience for questions. If you have any clarifications that you seek to be addressed, Sena would be around to address them accordingly. So you can also drop your questions in the chat box or raise your virtual hand, then I can call you to ask your questions. And whilst we wait for that, I would like to start with a question. So in your experience, has there been a case where, if you could share a case where good governance and ethical conduct prevented or resolved a potential dispute in your many experiences, if you could walk us through such a case?
Well, that's the thing. Um, it's a good question, but it is a good question, and the answer is difficult. The reason the answer is difficult, I'd like to use an analogy. So
Mhm.
my wife is a pediatrician uh,
Okay.
in a hospital, and most babies they have nappy rash, and you deal with it at home, right? But when we had our daughters, she was very paranoid about nappy rash because all the cases of nappy rash she's seen have been in the hospital where it's like, it's bad. Yeah, and that's the case with me is I most of the ones I see are bad. The disputes I see are bad. And in the good governance ones, what you're doing is averting the dispute. So it's very difficult to see where it would have, become something else, right?
Right, right.
But however, it's true to say that, as I said in the presentation, most projects have the same problems as dispute projects. And it's all about the people and how you manage it and it's the personal interaction. So I would like to point to when I was a project manager, because I hardly ever go into disputes because, yeah, those would be my examples.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sena. So the number of questions in the chat box. Let me to start. So Chelsea says, thank you for the insights shared, Sena. From your experience, where do most organizations fall short when it comes to implementing effective project governance? Is it in establishing a clear governance structure, communication flow, or accountability mechanism?
Um, Again, a very good question. So there is a relationship. There's a relationship between um, competence of the people and uh, uh, the I actually produced the I actually set this out in a paper, in a governance paper I wrote to a Society of Construction Law. So there's a graph. If your system is highly developed,
Mm.
right, it can account for a lack of experience in the people. Or if your system is not developed, you're a startup or something, but you've got very experienced people, then that organization can also be um, successful.
Okay.
So it's a balance. You need the systems, development of the systems, and you need the experience of the people, right? But you can't have no systems and lack of experience. That's always going to result in failure. So it's a graph with four sections, and I can share that afterwards. Does that answer that question?
Yes, yes, it does. So I see a virtual hand up from Justice Abaka. Justice, you may go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Sena.
Hello,
I think,
Justice.
yeah, I joined at the latter part of your presentation and couldn't get most of the things. So I would ask if you can summarize what you actually taught us and then some key takeaways that we can have as far as contract negotiations is concerned. Maybe just in 5 minutes or 3 minutes or something. Thank
Okay,
you.
so as the summary is this subject is very, very broad, right? So on the one hand, we're talking about disputes, on the other hand, we're talking about project governance, and either of those areas are very, very broad in themselves. Key takeaways in contract negotiations would be it depends on where the negotiation is, whether it's at the start, negotiating the contract initially, or whether it's at the end, trying to negotiate out of or resolve a dispute situation. And with both of them, I would say um, my key takeaways would be keep a good record, especially in the disputes, but also in going for the contract negotiations. Um, Keep a good record. Second, be aware of the risks, right? And be aware of the risks that you may not that they're the risks that you may know, but you may not know how big they are in terms of cost and time. And there's also the risks that you don't know. You can't account for the risks that you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? But for the ones that you know, um, account for them at the start. Account for them. Make sure that in negotiating your contract, you are aware of who holds that risk, right? Because it's those risks that will come back to bite you at the end. And if they come back to bite you at the end, um, you know, again, you're going to be reliant on the records all the way through on the records. And by records, I mean meeting minutes, I mean uh, um, correspondence, I mean programs, especially. I mean, you know, estimates where you've identified scope. Um, if you keep a good record at the end, they will help you resolve disputes. But most and most importantly, don't when you're in a negotiation, you need to be flexible and you need to understand the other person's position. If and you both need to be aware you're in a negotiation, right? Um, if you don't and you know sometimes you get people who just rigidly stick to their own opinion, and then it's like a marriage. Once you opinions become entrenched, the marriage dissolves, right? So those would be my key takeaways and the summary. But the subject is far too vast to be able to cover in an hour everything.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that response, Sena. So to our participants online, we would be posting this on our LinkedIn page afterwards, so you can still go back to visit this session so that you don't miss out on all the insights that were shared earlier. Okay, so Jacqueline says, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sena, for sharing your experience with us. My question is, how do you ensure compliance with both internal company policies and external legal standards during contract implementation?
Yeah, so the external legal standards or regulations um, would be set, and the internal policies would be written to comply with those standards, whether it's an engineering standard or a government regulation. The policies should be written to comply. And all of that is what we call corporate governance. There'll be a corporate, there'll be a part of the corporate that would write that policy. Maybe with advice from the project directorate, but it'll be a corporate endeavor. So that when you get into the project, you're using a policy that you know is already compliant, right? And um, you would be able to use that policy in going out to tender for work from contractors. And by definition, those contracts would also, because you'd write the requirements of those contracts will be compliant with your internal policy. So it's like a flow. I mean, it all flows through. And for any of, I mean, a corporate would need to keep, like for instance, where I was in London Underground, they have lots of standards because the first the rail is uh, it's called a it's a key safe environment because you're transferring the public and the public can get injured. So it's a safe, it's a very safe environment. But there are lots of standards because London Underground very, um, is very different from most other rail. The tunnels are much smaller, and they have a different system of electrifying the rails. So they have their own different standards that are internal, but they're all compliant with government standards and engineering standards, like you know the British standards as they call them. Does that help? Did I deal with that well?
Yes, yes, you have. So we have two more questions for you. Daniel says, yeah, so Jacqueline has just sent an emoji to say it's been answered. So Daniel says, good morning and thank you for the insightful presentation. From your presentation, we see that disputes often arise because contracts are either poorly drafted or not well administered, both ranking as high or 9 on the scale of courses. As consultants, when the implementation agency, who is also our client, is not properly administering the contract, how do we manage this situation professionally to ensure smooth project delivery?
Yes, it's always a you go tread carefully. So I've been involved in a number of assignments where I've been asked to go and review, and that's the key word, that's the answer effectively, to go and review a project. Maybe a project is failing. There was one, it was a paint factory that was supposed to be $100 million and his budget had doubled on $200 million. And the organization that was instructing me, they were working with lawyers as well, that was instructing me, it was a um, internal audit. It was the internal audit department of that organization that was instructing me. So typically, internal audit will be auditing, and they would have uh, uh, someone who's a project specialist who can audit projects as well. If they don't, they might ask someone like me to come in and review, and then you have to set the scope of what that review might entail, and that review might be as far not only of the processes or the system, but whether they've been complying with the processes and the system. And in that particular example, the paint factory that I was talking about, they wanted us to look at the competency of the individuals, and that was not so comfortable because you're basically trying to work out if they're competent for their job. So there's different performers that we devise for that project, and we went through it. We took so effectively to summarize effectively, the way to do that is to review, and the scope of that review is bespoke. But typically, it's systems. First, you review the systems, then you review the documents to see if they're compliant with the systems. And then sometimes it's the competence as well.
All right, Sena. Thank you again for addressing that for Daniel. So Raphael says, thank you, sir, for your educative presentation. Please, how does one identify realistic risk that can cause delay or increase costs? And how can we mitigate construction risk through value engineering? Thank you.
Yeah, so again, thank you. That was in my presentation. The answer is it's an iterative process, right? So you start with the scope of what you think you need to do, where there are areas outside your ability if you're the project manager, and there are areas outside your ability. You get the specialist to provide their input. You build this together, you have your initial program, or scope, then you can put a time to it, then you can try and put a cost to it. This is your initial estimate. And then you start to identify the risks. And when you identify the risks, you price the risks, you allocate time to the risks, and it grows. And it grows to a point where you think, oh, this is too expensive and this is too large. How can we decrease it? So you look at your risks and you think, well, um, maybe there's a risk working at height, um, uh, several stories, and you think, well, scaffolding is going to cost quite a bit. What am I going to do? I'll I'm not going to um, take on that risk because I'm a project manager. I'm not used to being out working at height. So I'm going to allocate that risk in my contract that I agree with the contractor down the line. And by doing so, you pick risks that you can deal with and risks that you can't, and do it down the line. A typical one, to give another example, when I was a rail project manager, um, access to the site was, I mean, a few people have been to London. It's quite tightly, densely packed. There's years and history, lots of ancient contracts where they long leases, leaseholds. So access was always a difficult issue. So instead of waiting for the contractor to come and try and get the land and then see that they've got no access, so they're waiting, and so we have to pay them for the time, extension of time. We recognized that as a risk, got a lawyer involved, and started accessing the leaseholds early, to release those contracts, because it can take quite a while. The same thing happened, Gautrain, um, Gautrain or Gautrain in South Africa, another rail project. Riyadh Metro, similar, where access was an issue, typically of long linear projects like pipelines, West Africa gas pipeline, where access can be an issue, and you you need to take steps. You need to recognize access is a risk and take steps to mitigate it front end.
All right. Thank you, Sena. So Grace says, good morning, everyone. It's been an insightful presentation. Please, I noted from the presentation that change control is a key issue in project management, leading to delays. Please, do you believe how these changes are escalated to stakeholders? Please, do you believe how these changes are escalated to stakeholders play a major role in this? Do stakeholders play a major role in this? Can you advise on how to handle such situations?
Yeah, I'm not sure what is meant by stakeholders, but I'm assuming an external, or do you mean, a senior person in the company?
I want to believe stakeholders here would maybe refer to the stakeholders in project communities that projects are being implemented.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's again uh, a difficult one. I mean, I was involved in a project, High Street Kensington. It was the rail. The trains were going round the bend, and I don't know if you know, but trains when they're going around the bend, they squeak and they make a lot of noise. And the stakeholder, the people who live there were, you know, quite annoyed with the whole situation. Um, and management of stakeholders is key. So talking to them ahead, going in person sometimes and talking to them in that particular case is key. So they know what you're doing, publicizing dates ahead of time so they know that on such and such a date there's going to be uh, roadworks or whatever works it is, and it's going to be noisy. Please bear with us. It's quite key. Letter drops, things in the press, is quite key to managing stakeholders. But ultimately, a stakeholder, um, once you tell people things, they kind of brace themselves. You're preparing the way, and it's much easier. There might be some difficult ones, but ultimately they should not be delaying the projects, or you should try your utmost for them not to be to stop your project.
Right. Sena, thank you. So there's one from Milex. Would I say by standards, so he's asking for your contact, but by standards, we do not share the contacts of our presenters. What I can advise is you can reach out to him on his LinkedIn, and he should be able to provide you with all the guidance that you would need. And also, please, next time when joining, we also advise our participants to sign in with actual names so that we can easily identify those who are joining us. So on this note, I would like to thank you so much, Sena, for making time to join us on our today's session and for sharing such, valuable insights with us. We are grateful, and to our online audience as well. Thank you for also making the time to join us. And next week, we will be here to engage with you on yet another exciting topic. Until then, stay inspired and have a productive week. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.